Well, welcome to Positively Rural webinar. It's wonderful to welcome so many people to this session where we're focusing on pilgrimage. We're so glad that you've chosen to participate this morning. My name's Carla Cornett. I'm part of the Learning Network and I'm the Aligned Officer to the Yorkshire West District. Positively Rural is an established quarterly webinar. These webinars are planned and organised by a team of people who are passionate about mission and ministry within the rural context. During our Positively Rural gatherings, we reflect on how we might best minister and engage in mission within a rural context. We share good news stories. We consider together ideas for mission. We hope that this webinar, and indeed all our Positively Rural webinars, provide you with an opportunity to listen to experienced practitioners and educators, but importantly, to be a place to share ideas. So it's really, really wonderful to welcome one and all this morning, especially though to welcome those who will be helping us to explore our theme of pilgrimage for today. We will learn more about the Peak Wesley Way. We will welcome Sammy, who will introduce the Hope Together UK pilgrimage resources. And we welcome James Ballantyne too, a member of the Learning Network, who will speak about pilgrimage without walking. So finally, it's my pleasure to welcome Lorraine, who will share any additional information and then introduce our person, Sarah, who will be leading our devotions today.
First to Sarah, who is going to lead us in an opening prayer.
Thank you, Lorraine, and morning, everybody. It's good to be with you. I'm Sarah Hume. I'm the Methodist Rural Mission and Ministry Officer. I'm just going to share, I'm part of something called Mountain Pilgrims in my own location. I live in North Cumbria, and we often try and create together words and prayers, and this is a beautiful gathering prayer that has been co-created, and I thought it set us off nicely this morning. So, we have come, gathered from the familiar patterns of daily life, gathered in this place where ruminations find space, where memories of tree-lined ways and muddy paths remind us of the Creator's constancy. We are explorers on the way, bound together in this time, gathering our not-nothings to discover our sacred somethings this day. So as we gather together, may we have ears to hear, hearts to listen, and sparks that ignite something in us from all that we share and learn together. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sarah. That was wonderful. Thank you. Lovely to have something that's co-created as well, where a group have worked together. That's lovely. We're going to go straight into our first session, which is on the Peak Wesley Way, and I'm not going to say much about it because it's all in the pre-recorded interview that we've got. Unfortunately, none of the people who could have come to speak could make this time of day, so we've pre-recorded the interview, so let's hope it goes well. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our pilgrimage webinar. It is an absolute pleasure to be able to talk today about pilgrimage. It's one of my favourite themes, and I'm going to be talking today with members of the Peak Circuit, who have recently put together their own pilgrimage. I'm going to show you, I don't know if I can show you the book of the Peak Wesley Way. Have you got it? So this is the pilgrimage book, and we're going to talk about how that began, how it developed, and what it's like maintaining a pilgrimage in your circuit. So welcome, everybody. I'm going to go first to Heather. Hello, Heather.
Good morning, Lorraine.
I would like to talk to you first because I know you were right there at the beginning with the idea and the development and where we were going to go with this whole pilgrimage idea. So what was the inspiration behind it, Heather?
Well, I would say it was definitely a God-given moment, because a fellow member of the circuit leadership team and I met by chance, and she was actually looking at doing a small pilgrimage route through one of our villages called Great Longston. And at that same time, I had been to take a service, and members of the congregation were talking about how they may have to close. They were down to 4 members. And I said, oh, you know, I'm sure there might be an opportunity for you to use your church for other purposes. And basically, the idea didn't really go anyway. They weren't very enthusiastic. So I sort of left it. And then this colleague and I met and discussed the idea again, and decided that now there were 2 of us with similar ideas, we would take it to the circuit leadership team. And we took it to the circuit leadership team, who at first didn't seem very keen, but thankfully came back afterwards with great enthusiasm. God had obviously moved in their direction during that period, and that's really how it started, Lorraine.
Thank you, Heather. So you are a member of the circuit leadership team and a worship leader, and firmly embedded in Methodism?
Absolutely, yes, firmly.
So the Peak Wesley Way came about through worship and through people discussing their faith?
Yes, but also looking at what might happen to some of our very small village chapels if we didn't take any sort of action. You know, to me, the church is not a building. The church is what we do in our lives. And I felt this was an opportunity to offer something of what we had in our beautiful area to people who might not be able to afford to come otherwise. And it gave them an opportunity to share what we had.
Thank you very much. I'm going to come across to you, Julie, because you are the superintendent minister of the Peak Circuit. And here is this incredible, exciting idea of starting something new and different. I like the way Heather said, I didn't seem over enthusiastic to start with, but obviously something happened. A God-given moment happened. And how did you react when you first heard about this and you thought, wow, this is an idea? What made you think, I'm going to grab this and go with this?
Yeah, I can remember distinctly saying at one point, so I was acting superintendent at the time, all of this mushroomed into where we are now. I can remember saying to Heather and the other lady she referred to, Sheila, that it's took a while for us to catch up with you, but we've caught up with you now. So those seeds that they sowed within us began to germinate and come to something. And I just felt that God was saying to me, to us, as I took on the acting superintendent role, use what you've got. Use what you've got. And so looking around us in this beautiful area, we've got our chapels, and as Heather's just said, 2 of them were closed for worship. So what is going to happen with them? So we've got this beautiful history of worship going on back for decades, well, hundreds of years, but also the beautiful area and people coming to this area. People are coming to us. So we've got chapels, we've got the creation that God's landed us in. We've got people coming to us. We've got village communities that are very much communities, and so how can we liaise with those communities better than we have been doing? And this pilgrimage seemed to me just to tick all the boxes. So we got going, and we thought we were going to get it all up and running in 6 months, and we were quite naive. But that's where Neil came in.
Julie, what did it involve? I mean, not great detail, but you've mentioned about Heather mentioned about the churches nearing closing and wondering what their future was. You mentioned about what can we do with these churches. So what actually does the Peak Wesley Way do with the churches?
Again, God has been at work, because we were able to revamp, it's not quite the right word, I don't think, but install amenities into the chapels which made them unique. which still enables the chapels to be used by the community. So there's two separate identities. The halls can be used, and that won't impact on pilgrims. So in each of the chapels, we've been able to install a kitchenette, so with basic facilities where people can come in and they can, they've got a microwave so they can cook a meal if they need to. And we provide tea, coffee, fresh milk, biscuits, fresh fruit, and there's also showering facilities, camp beds, because we are pilgrims, so there are facilities, but we're not moving into 5-star accommodation. So it's about pilgrimage and just roughing it a little bit. But lots of information as well about what people could find round and about in the local communities, how they can access those. So we've talked to shops, different organisations, pubs, where people can go and get food. And since I signposting pilgrims to places like that as well.
So how many churches are involved?
8,
Five.
5.
Well,
Yeah.
five for
Right, so
overnight days, plus another one where they can actually finish their route. So 6 walking
Okay.
days a week.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we've got now this idea that has bloomed. It started, as we've said earlier, in a bit of worship and a bit of knowledge and enthusiasm. And then that came to the circuit leadership team, who wonderfully caught the vision and have worked with vision. So now these chapels have been converted. They're still chapels, they're still used for worship or whatever they're used for, but they can provide accommodation overnight for pilgrims. So the idea is that the pilgrim walks from one to the other, from one chapel and then to the next one through the Peak Park.
Yeah, so it's like a long distance walk. People that would undertake a long distance walk. The difference being with this one is that people are stopping overnight in a chapel, and it's open to all people of all faiths and of none. And we will engage with people as much or as little as they would want us to with the spirituality of that pilgrimage walk. And it depends on what's going on as well in the different communities, in the chapel itself and the villages as people come along. So we've got pilgrims coming soon, and we've got Holy Week coming up. So people might want to engage in the things of Holy Week. There'll be the well blessings coming up very soon across the area, and all that they involve. In Hathersage a few weeks ago, we had a brass band concert, and people got free tickets to go and see the brass band concert. So it's quite diverse.
Yeah, that sounds very diverse to me.
Yeah.
Neil, you are the Sheffield Circuit Mission Enabler. So, Neil, I'm going to ask you, were you involved with this from the beginning?
So I got involved, I suppose, just as the vision was starting to spread. So kind of Sheila, who we've mentioned, said all kind of was talking about kind of what was going on in this sort of closed chapel without a congregation. So I kind of came out and had a little bit of a look and wander around, and it was just this most amazing, I suppose, kind of creative vision and recognition of sort of what could be, in the people that walk past our chapels could actually kind of be walking in a sense with us, and on our journey with us. So that's how I kind of first got involved. A lot's moved on since then, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we're now up and running. It's now a thing of its own entity. But I have been a Methodist for a little while, and I might have been to 1 or 2 Methodist committee meetings. What I want to know is, how did you organise a group of people in a committee to all have the same vision and reach the same end at the same time? How does that happen?
I guess if we're to be a pilgrimage, a journey with purpose, and I guess if we're trying to encourage people who haven't done a pilgrimage before to do that, and to make it a smooth enough experience that they can do that, the kind of all the things that we've got to think about and sort of break it down into, well, what were they experience on the way, and kind of how do they get there, and sort of therefore can we make it accessible by public transport, kind of how do we write some instructions for a guidebook that they can read. So there's all of that stuff to think about, but there's also how are we doing that ourselves, and how do we kind of learn to journey together into creating this thing. So that was whole experience in itself, that it was, I guess as we've mentioned already, it was completely different to how the circuit had thought about church before, that we're engaging with people often as a one-off experience, although some of them that we're still in touch with, that we're engaging in some senses a commercial activity, that actually we've got to be able to sustain these chapels, and pay the heating bills and write the good quality guidebook and stick it in the post, all that type of stuff. So we've got to raise the money to cover all of those sorts of things as well. So we're thinking about it that way, and breaking this kind of huge long journey down into a series of little steps. So after thrashing around for a while, one of our key breakthroughs was sort of breaking the task down into different teams. So we had a team of the people that are good at thinking about the practicalities of making the buildings ready, and speaking to the builders, and how can we put a shower in without spoiling the atmosphere of the chapel. Concentrated on those. Those who others will be focused on the guidebook and marking out the route and drawing other people in to test the route that we've written out, and that people wouldn't get lost on the way. Others still will be involved in the creating a website and all that sort of stuff. So using different people's gifts, breaking down into different teams, and then learning to trust what each other was doing, and what decisions we needed to all take together, and what things we would leave to a small group of people to do.
Did people stay in their groups, or did they have an opinion on everything? Or once we ever, I mean, I'm just thinking of my experiences in Methodist committees.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was at the time doing, kind of sponsored by the Methodist Church, doing a project management qualification. And there's all this wonderful theory about teams and accountability and responsibilities and matrices and Gantt charts and all this lovely stuff. But ultimately, most of the people who made this happen were doing it in their own free time. And they were doing it because they cared, and because they had a vision, or they had realized, or they grasped someone else's vision and wanted to join in and help make that happen. So yes, there was an element of we have to kind of to do our best to hold to a efficient way of doing it, whilst recognizing that actually this is part of our journey of discipleship. So we're doing this as a group of disciples, and recognizing as well that we kind of mentioned already, it took far longer than we expected, partly because once you start doing stuff, you realize all the things you need to sort out, but also the recognition that people have lives to live beyond this as well. And so there was the kind of continuing need to respond to circumstances, whatever else is happening in people's lives, and kind of, allow all of that had to happen, and go on the journey as well, which I think was a really important part of the journey. Was they started from Heather and Sheila, had both commenced a vision, and they'd seen a picture of the future that the rest of us didn't know, that was entirely between them and God. And we had to we went on a journey where that became not Heather and Sheila's vision, but actually it became something that belongs to the circuit, and how to walk that journey with grace and dignity, and listening to what is it we haven't noticed that Sheila and Heather have kind of grasped, but what do other people have to bring into that and kind of almost the pilgrimage growing up and becoming a person and part of the team in its own right took time, and took a lot of listening, and took a lot of kind of grace, particularly from Heather and Sheila along the way. They could have held on to it, but they let go and let other people join them.
evening here, and I wish we could talk all day. And knowing actually each other, we probably could talk all day. We don't have time on the webinar, but let me just summarize quickly. We've had an inspirational moment. Some people have grasped some visions, who have put the two together, and they have become a greater vision. We've got the circuit leadership team on board, managed to find some funding, found an organizer who must have been a godsend to everybody. You've got the superintendent backing you, right behind you, and that's brought to fruition with the development and patience and grace of many people. It's brought to fruition what is now known as the Peak Wesley Way. Is that it now? Does it take much maintenance, or is that it? Any of you can answer. I don't mind.
I think there's just one other aspect I would like to draw attention to, Lorraine, and that is the fact that right from the beginning, for me and for Sheila, this was also about community engagement. We'd gone from a time where virtually everybody used to go to church or chapel to a time when few do. And we felt that engaging the community was a big part of what we wanted to do, and that is slowly happening. We're having open days. We are having people who come and welcome our pilgrims who are nothing to do with our churches, but are part of the community. And I just feel that was an important aspect that we haven't touched on, if that's okay to mention.
Thank you. That is brilliant.
Yeah. And I think that feeds into part of the answer to your question, Lorraine, that again, the circuit were really clear from the start that we didn't want to create an extra burden for people. So we're always very clear that the part of how it works is that someone's employed as the pilgrimage manager. But actually, it's not about just leaving it be. Actually, it's trying to find the ways that are life-giving and play to people's gifts and skills. So when people walk the pilgrimage, they'll be greeted at some of the chapels along the way by local people who will kind of just ask them how they're doing, if appropriate, pray with them. And as Heather said, that's people from part of the chapel congregation, but increasingly that's people from the village. And actually, it's about keeping the wheels turning. Yes, there's some wonderful people within the circuit who are kind of pedaling furiously, kind of like sort of a swan below the water. But actually, as we move forward, increasingly that's rippling out. And there are people who previously wouldn't have called themselves part of the chapel congregation, but are actually through the Peak Wesley Way are becoming, whatever language they would use, that they're part of the church in that place because they're helping people on this spiritual journey. They might not use that language at all. They might just say, I'm just helping out you because Heather asked me to. But actually, it's a way for church to broaden, to involve more people. And that's a really important part of the future of how it sustains itself.
That is amazing. And the thing that we're always saying we're missing, we don't go beyond the walls of the building.
Yeah. And actually, John Wesley said, didn't he, the whole world is his parish. For us, it's the Peak District, or the part of the Peak District that we're involved in, and this is being church. This really is being church, and church living out the Great Commission of making disciples in a different way. And it's enabling discipleship for people that come into our area, into our chapels. We might never ever see them again. And that's fine, because we hopefully enabled them to increase their spiritual well-being. The soul gets forgotten quite a lot. And if we can help people increase their spiritual well-being, then that's really the key for me personally. And for some, we'll set our programs off back home, and we'll be praying that the journey that they had with us will continue to grow wherever their home is. And then I've seen people that are connected to our chapels, been part of our chapels all their life long, and I've seen their discipleship grow. I really, really have, and it's just been beauty to behold. And that's because it's enabling people naturally to have conversations with the village community. People that have been part of the community, they've been part of these village communities all their lives, been born there. How do you have that conversation with people about your faith when you've perhaps not had that before? How do you step into that, over that liminal moment? And this really is this pilgrimage route is answered so many ways in which we can be God's people.
Thank you very much to all of you for giving us your time and your insight. I'm sure there's a million and one questions we would all like to ask you, but for now we're going to have to say goodbye. Just one very quick thing. Would you do it again?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, we've got projects coming out of our ears, Lorraine. We're better facilitated of how to go about that now.
Dave Pugh will be coming soon.
Oh, thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you for watching that. I hope you found it helpful. It was obviously and is still quite a big project that takes quite a lot of involvement. But our next speaker, Sarah, is going to introduce, has something different to tell us.
Yes, thank you, Lorraine. Just to say, the welcome you receive if you even do a tiny part of the Peak Wesley Way is second to none. I can highly recommend it. Having pitched up with a group of Queen's students in September, just beautiful. And do, if you get a chance, check out their website and even consider going and experiencing it yourself. But I am delighted that we're joined by Sammy Jordan this morning. Sammy and I have had I've had the privilege of working with Sammy just a little bit this year into what has become Tri-Pilgrimage, and it's just so exciting to see the Methodist Church collaborating with Hope Together UK and what could be achieved in this very short space of a few months. So over to you, Sammy, and it's great to have you with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for such a generous introduction. The feeling is mutual. It's been amazing to meet you and work with you as well. So as Sarah has said, my name is Sammy Jordan. I work for Hope Together, which is a national Christian charity. We support and resource churches and Christians in evangelism. We want everyone everywhere to know about Jesus. And we've really enjoyed working with our friends at the Methodist Church to produce a new set of resources called Tri-Pilgrimage. Now, I wonder if you like going on a journey, whether it's on foot or by bus or by buggy or by bike. I wonder if, like me, normally the destination is really important. There has to be a purpose for it. There has to be a reason, whether it's to post a parcel or to go to the shop or to see somebody, but there has to be a focus. And what I love about pilgrimage is actually the journey itself is the whole point of it. And so this has come out of, I guess, noticing very anecdotal evidence over recent years that since COVID, perhaps more people have got into walking, that a lot of those daily walks have continued. We now have people doing health walks. I live on a new estate on the south coast, and there's a group of neighbours that meet every Monday at 10:30 to go on a health walk in the local community. I don't know if you know that some people have walking meetings. The idea is that when we walk, our brains are able to process things better. So out of this has come a desire to produce some resources that make pilgrimage more accessible to people, where the journey is the destination and where we're offering people an opportunity to connect with themselves, with others, with their local community, and maybe with God. So rather than just look at me, a lot of these resources are web-based. So I'm going to show you some pictures so that you will see on the slides what you will find if you then go and check out this website online. And I'll take you through what the offer is and how you can get involved. There's various ways and various levels, and the Peak Wesley Way is part of it. It's featured on Tri-Pilgrimage. So let me bring up my slideshow, and then you can look at some pictures instead of just me. So, okay, 1 minute. So this is Tri-Pilgrimage. Okay, the website is tripilgrimage.org.uk. It's been designed to be used by Christians, but also to be accessible to those of all faiths or none. And there are different ways and routes through it. The team behind it, we're very taken with this quote from St. Augustine: it is solved by walking. That idea that, and even if you can't go on a physical journey, the idea of going on a journey, it changes our headspace. By putting ourselves sometimes in a different physical space, we can be in a different mental and emotional space. It gives us that space to process and that space to connect. And so what Try Pilgrimage, as I said before, wants to do is make the pilgrimage, the offer, the invitation of pilgrimage accessible to everyday people. And so some of the time that's through signposting, amazing pilgrimage opportunities like the Peak Wesley Way, but it's also by bringing it right to people's front door. And that's what I want to show you now. So if you're an individual starting with Try Pilgrimage, then there are lots of places that you can start. And as you will see from this slide, it's a very step-by-step approach. So we have some fuel for your journey. So before you even leave the front door, we have a resource based on the BBC TV series Pilgrimage from last year, that people can watch the series and then think about the questions and reflect together. So you can kind of go on a bit of a journey just from the comfort of your armchair or your sofa. And that's something that you can do on your own, or you can do it with a small group, or if you're a church, you might want to host it for others. But it's a very gentle and accessible introduction, and it's been written for people who might be curious about the Christian faith, okay, people who might be exploring and asking questions. We also have some videos available from a lady, an amazing pioneer minister called Errol Parry, a friend of Sarah's. So if anybody saw the BBC TV series Pilgrimage last year, I'm a bit of a fan, I must admit, but Errol is the pioneer priest that the pilgrims meet in episode 1. So if you haven't watched the TV series, basically 7 celebrities, although you might not know them, some of them are minor celebrities, they go on a pilgrimage, and last year it was through North Wales, okay, so the beautiful countryside of Snowdonia. And Errol is a pioneer priest who introduces them to some ways of connecting with the landscape and ways of connecting with God. And so Errol has done a series of 7 short videos, most of them are like 5 or 6 minutes long, that will take people through various pilgrimage ideas. So she introduces herself, she explains what pilgrimage is, and then she encourages us in things like silence, in things like stillness, and in things like history, and what she calls thin spaces, looking at the edge of the horizon. So even before you leave your front door, you can be inspired, or as we call it, fueled and resourced for whatever journey you want to take. The next step is to start taking a journey, and it can start outside your front door. So we've created a resource that uses lots of things that people might have locally available to them, whether they want to go by bus, bike, buggy, or whether they want to walk. So it asks people to plot a local route based on certain things. So it might be, do you have a high place somewhere near where you live? Do you have a place of history? Do you have a beautiful place? Do you have a peaceful place? Is there some water? And people can mix and match these different pilgrimage points into a route that suits them. We suggest that they start small. So we have a beginning and we have an end, and we suggest maybe 2 or 3 points in between. And then as people's confidence and experience grows, they can make it longer. We have various guides available to help people through this. So there are prompts, there are things to think about, there are words that people can interpret as prayers to say along the way, there are questions to reflect on. If you are a church, the invitation is to help people start out on this journey. So it's to facilitate and host a journey for them. Maybe you want to gather a group of people to watch the BBC series and to use the material like a small group, and then see if the journey watching the programme and exploring the questions leads to a desire for a physical journey. Maybe you want to take the resource. It's a very similar resource, so local pilgrimage opportunities that people can mix and and match into a route that suits them. Maybe you want to host that for people in your community. And what the Methodist Church have done with us is they produced packs that people can order for free. So if churches want to sign up to host a pilgrimage, they can then get information sheets, badges. Everybody loves a badge, don't they? Badges and prayer cards and leaflets that support and resource that journey. So I said we have fuel for the journey. So as well as the videos from Errol, as well as the free to download resources that get you started, as well as the BBC TV series discussion pack, there's a podcast, we have a finger labyrinth, and we have a prayer guide. And I'd like to show you some of those now. So here's the BBC resource, just in case you've not come across it. The 2025 BBC TV series on pilgrimage is set in Switzerland and Austria, and that was on over the Easter weekend. The resource we use, as I say, is based on 2024 in North Wales. And I love that it's a UK-based pilgrimage. I think if we're trying to make pilgrimage accessible, then immediately bringing it into the UK and to North Wales brings it within reach of, I hope, ordinary people. Just like the previous conversation, what we're really hoping is that some of these people who are spiritually curious, who are asking questions about life, but who wouldn't normally connect with church, might begin to do so by taking a walk. This is the beautiful prayer card that has been designed to support those journeys. So you'll see that for each of the places that you might choose to visit on your journey, there's something to read, something to think about, and something to say or to use as a prayer. And as I said before, you can use as many or as few of these as you like. This, you'll see, is our finger labyrinth. I don't know if you've used finger labyrinths before, but again, you don't have to go anywhere to use them. They take you on a journey in your imagination through reflection, a bit like a maze. And so there's something that you can use physically with and trace with your fingers, and then there are some questions to prompt you as you go on your journey. This is free to download from the website. You can use it on your own, but it's also in those packs that you can order for free from the Methodist Church. Now, in order to make it accessible, what we're asking people to do is, if you want to host a pilgrimage, then on our website, go to the host page, find this map, find this little button and add your invitation. The Peak Wesley Way is on here. There are a few other ones on here as well, but we've just started to go live with the invitation. So if you're willing to host a pilgrimage, whether it's something as amazing and sophisticated as the Peak Wesley Way, or whether it's just a walk around your local area, we'd love for you to put it on your map, because then people who want to try pilgrimage, as the website name suggests, can find you. So anything you put on the map, just make sure that it's information that you're happy to be in the public domain. But where and a web address or a name, someone to contact, is all we need, so that anyone locally who's interested in going on a journey to connect with themselves and others, that sense of place, purpose, and maybe with God, can find those details. So that's how the map works. We have tried to include various routes, and as I've said, the ones we're suggesting are adaptable in length. We've been very careful on our website to use images that show accessibility. You can see the dad carrying his child here, and this lady you might not be able to see, she's behind our photographs on my screen, but she's in her late 80s and she still enjoys a walk. So the idea is that we want this to be accessible and adaptable for people of any age and walking ability. There's also an invitation to turn a physical journey into a virtual journey. Now, yes, you can do that with the prayer card and following the prompts, or you can use the finger labyrinth, but there are also resources available that you can then do a journey from your armchair. Now, more resources we hope will become available. So I think Shetland are working on a virtual pilgrimage. but we have a resource that supports what's called virtual prayer walking. So how to prayer walk your community by using Street View, Google Maps, even your imagination. And so we've pivoted that resource, we've flexed it a bit, and we've put it on the website so that if you're not able to get out of the house for whatever reason, you can still go on a journey and get some of the benefits from pilgrimage from your armchair or wherever you like to sit. We've also got family-friendly resources, so there are ways of engaging very young children and older children with pilgrimage, as well as a resource that schools might want to use. Then you'll find some other kind of supported walks. Okay, so you've got Peak Pilgrimage on here. This is where you can find the virtual pilgrimage, but some of the more set walks around the UK that are well established, you'll find those on here as well. So hopefully there really is something for everybody, from people who want a challenge and want to do all of the Peak Wesley Way and some of these really well established curated walks, okay, to people that are just starting out and might want to do something, just a route in their local community. And this is live and it's ongoing. So pilgrimage is a journey, and Try Pilgrimage, the website, is a journey too. So what we hope is that as people engage, more resources will be put on here that will make it more accessible to more people, that there'll be stories that then inspire, and more people will hopefully want to join in. That's the whole point of pilgrimage, isn't it? That where you start isn't where you finish, that you're changed by the experience and the journey. And so the offer of Try Pilgrimage will change and develop as people engage with it and share the benefit of their experiences and stories with us. So that's Try Pilgrimage. Do go and check it out. It's beautiful. I know I'm biased, but I think it's beautiful. And I'm really excited to bring pilgrimage within reach of lots and lots of people that might not have tried it before.
Sammy, thank you very much indeed. That's given us access to plenty of resources. Thank you. What we're going to do now is go into breakout groups where you will be encouraged to reflect on what you have heard. So we'd like you to, when you find yourself in your breakout groups, which Katrin will organise for us, just reflect on what you have heard and address this question. Could pilgrimage be incorporated into a project for your church in some way? So we're not saying big, big projects or small projects. We just want you to reflect on that. Is it a tool that you may be able to work with? Katrin, thank you. Welcome back, everybody. We hope you had some good time for reflection there and thinking about pilgrimage. If there's something you'd like to share with us, do pop it into the chat so that we can see what your thoughts were and where you were going with those thoughts. And if you've any questions, we'll do our best to answer them. We are just going to take a quick 5-minute break and have some wriggle room. Lovely. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you've had time to do a little dance and a wriggle. And we are now going to move into our next session, which is going to be brought to us by James. James will tell you about himself during this session, so I don't really need to introduce you, and just to invite you to listen, and again to say if we have a need for chaplains, we have 2 on the screen with their numbers there should you need them. James, you found yourself having taken a pilgrimage without walking a single step, so over to you.
Thanks, Lorraine. I'm not sure why I volunteered to do this, but I am here, and I wanted to share a bit of, I guess it's kind of could be described as an inner journey or inner pilgrimage, pilgrimage of the South. I am part of the Learning Network in the North East in the Darlington district, formerly a youth worker, and I think when I was thinking about this, I was realizing that sort of pilgrimages or journeys, you always need a starting point and an ending point. And so I thought I would take myself and take us back to where I was about 6 years ago, and thinking about sort of an inner spirituality or spirituality of the South. And so I'd picked up this in a youth work conference about spirituality. It's a well-trodden thing of spirituality of 4 quadrants. And I remember when I saw this in 2017, I internally said to myself, oh, it doesn't really matter about the self one as long as I'm doing the others. And it was a kind of a thing of like, well, you know, I'm looking after other people. I'm a youth worker. I'm doing a ministry. I'm tending to a garden. I'm doing good sort of food production. I care about who I give my money to. I had done church since I was a child in terms of Sunday school and working for a variety of Christian companies and organizations and doing the God thing. And so as I sat in a youth work conference in 2017, actually my faith at the time could easily deny the bit about the self being important, and almost justify that. Already I'm well off my notes, by the way, so you know we'll go with whatever these 10 minutes are going to feel like, but I'm going to talk about them. So and I could justify my spiritual self denied myself, if that makes sense. And so even though I could have some kind of capital in those other quadrants, as I looked at this even like a few weeks ago, I was realizing, what did that mean for those other quadrants if the self quadrant was so empty and hollow and just empty, actually. And then I thought about what actually was going on at that time in the self quadrant. Oh, actually, there we go. There's some of that there. Oh, and I look like this, by the way. So this was what I looked like 7 years ago. I found this photo this morning. I thought you probably don't need to see just PowerPoints of what I look like, but actually a real photo. And if any of you have been through that kind of level of the level of things I was going through, you don't take many photos of yourself at the time because you don't really want to know what you look like. So that was me. If any of you have seen how well I dress right now, you'll know how horrific that looks. But at the time, I didn't actually care. And so these were some of the things that I was doing in 2018, but I didn't know about them because I was just doing them as a default thing. I didn't have names for any of these things. I just was in survival mode from a variety of things, and this is what I was doing to cope, amongst other things. And these are the things I'm prepared to share with you. But ultimately, underneath, I was feeling very small, invisible, in denial, and my self quadrant, for want for a better phrase, was just empty. And I read loads of books because my faith at the time was very intellectual. So I'll go back to here. It was a kind of a thinking faith. I'd just done an MA in theology. My bookshelves were full of people like Paul Ricoeur and Gadamer and various thinking people because my brain wanted to be in brain mode, and thinking was part of my faith. And so that my faith was quite a critical one, full of doubt, but behind it was all this stuff, and that wasn't great. And so one of the books on my bookshelf, and I still to this day don't quite know how it got there. I had previously just read this book by Richard Rohr about St. Francis of Assisi, which links quite nicely with the subject of pilgrimage. So maybe I read that. But then this found its way on my bookshelf. I must have bought it. And at the time, I picked it up and well, that's not intellectual enough. And I left it there for probably about a year because it didn't fit with trying to be somebody who was thinking about stuff all the time and showing off a bit about all that thinking. And what I then did was, about in August 2018, I picked it up. And the reason I picked it up is because I was unemployed and I couldn't buy any more books. And I was about to be I was in a very difficult situation in terms of employment and a marriage and a home life that was just a mess, but I was sort of surviving through it, feeling very alone. And I picked up the book. And if any of you have read Falling Upwards, you'll know that Richard Rohr talks about two halves of life. The first, he said, it's about achievement, about making it in life, and the second about using what you learn to have a kind of a quality of life that's much more peaceful and content, and to be the actual person you want to be on the inside in the second half of life. But he said that between one and the other, there's this kind of chasm of shift there's like a bolt of lightning, there's a crisis, there's a thing that causes the shift from one to the other. It wasn't often a gradual process. Something happens. And depending how you responded to it is what he said. And if I'm honest, I didn't understand that first bit, because I felt wounded and I felt like I hadn't had an ego. I hadn't been this performative thing, even though I was known as somebody as quite a good youth worker. But I was on the run and I was in survival mode, and I almost bottled that up for a day I never wanted to arrive. But when I read the book, when I sat on my sofa and read a book, I could see that this was a path or a light or a framework or not even a permission giving, but it almost set out the possibility that there was something beyond what I was about to go through, and I had to go through it, because up until then I'd been on the run, or I'd been trying to avoid it, or try and soothe it, or try and deny it, or all those kind of things. So maybe recognize wasn't the word, but I said this book gave me a framework. It gave me almost the path of the journey that I was still a very much unknown thing, but it said, but it kind of it gave it within a kind of spiritual framework that I could sort of cling to and resonate with. So I recognized at that point I then had a bit of a choice, although actually I had no choice, because emotional breakdown was pretty much on the cards, and in the midst of everything was dark and swirly, but that was also a very normal experience looking back now. And so my choice was to either be to face it or to deny it again, to try and bottle it up, to do survival mode. But there was something about trust this path, or even trust that something better is going to be there, even if you don't know what it is. So on that day in September 2018, I rang a friend and said, I have nowhere to go, nowhere to sleep, I have no money. And he said, because he was a minister with a 4-bedroom vicarage, said, you can come and live with me for 5 months. And I said, okay. And that began the rebuild. And what I didn't know I needed was safety. And then from those steps was lots of vulnerability, lots of telling people this story of where I was at that time, and began to gather friends around me and support, because there was various members of my family I couldn't go to. And that began a process, almost a 6-year rebuild that I didn't know was going to take that long, and is still ongoing. But by Christmas, I'd got a job. By January, I rang up and got subsidized therapy. But gradually filling up that self quadrant with facing a sense of, like, not facing a sense of self, but kind of doing tiny things that meant I am important, or actually like facing this isn't as bad as it could be, but it's a long way to go. And bits of self-care and bits of feelings that had been denied, and even having a positive self-regard for my body, because one of the things was comfort eating. And I think I took out shares in Tesco's granary bread because it was 8 to 10 slices a night to cope with things for about 15 years. You wouldn't recognize that now, but I don't recognize that now. But it was all of these things in terms of dealing with myself, but also to top up that self quadrant. But it was this book that I read on my sofa that kind of gave me the pathway for the journey that was about to happen, and kind of gave it a framework. And it's not the only book I would say that saved my life, but it's certainly one that kind of helped me on this inner pilgrimage for myself. And as I developed and became more emotionally safe and healthy, that also had an impact on my spirituality, which I didn't realize at the time, or I didn't realize beforehand how unhealthy it was. But becoming more whole as a person through that process. I often say that I met God opposite a therapist's chair, because it was about safety and emotional and that connectivity. And so, so that began the journey of my inner pilgrimage. dark night of the soul, call it what it was, but it was about filling up that spiritual self of that kind of that quadrant. I'm just going to check the clock. So I'd say that was part one of my journey in a pilgrimage. It was almost the crisis that kicked it off in the first place, the crisis that needed to break through. I talk about my healing journey sometimes as an onion with layers, but the first one was about 15 inches thick of raw steel, because the first one needed a crisis to get through. And but lots of moments since about that I feel that about rawness and vulnerability. I'm not going to give you what happened between 2018 and 2023, but I want to share with you the second part and another book that I also picked up on my sofa that described the next part of my journey. Let me click the thing. Okay. So part two. So quite a lot happened. I was still doing a lot of reading. My self-help collection bookshelf was now bigger than my theology one. I now had shares in Waterstone's self-help spirituality section and other places, and 4 or 5 lots of therapy in the time, and in that year I began to think I was starting to live a bit more, I think, and I was doing things that were more creative. Then a number of things happened in the summer and I crashed big time. It'd be fair to say that extensive reminders of my childhood trauma came flooding back and crashed in another big way, but with some framework and some understanding of what I needed to do and a lots of support system, but I still crashed. My faith in that time had taken me to a number of places, and I've been reading things on spirituality from people like Eckhart Tolle, looking at spirituality and healing and a variety of different things, and sort of embracing things like Northumbria community and the Celtic faith, and so the journey in the autumn took me, as I said, to therapy again for the third or fourth time, and had to deal with a number of things. And I was also reading this book at the time, which is Anam Cara by John O'Donoghue. And between sessions 8 and 9 of therapy, so here we go. Between sessions 8 and 9 of therapy, which was looking at some of the emotional things, I read this part of Anam Cara, some of which is on the screen for you. And it's talking about how we often want to shame or hide our really dark parts. And he talked about how he sometimes did, because I'd learned in a number of years to become a friend to myself, self-care, about being best friends with yourself, those kind of things. And then John O'Donoghue writes this, and I was reading it, and you almost need to become a stranger to yourself again to go to some of those places and to look at those dark places and to care for them. And I had the image of this. If you know Lord of the Rings, you'll know this image. But what I had the image of is, John O'Donoghue writes, said almost we need to go to those dark places and be led there by those dark places, because our friends don't often go there. And the image I had was of Lord of the Rings, and you've got Gollum, who's the guide, who takes, spoiler alert, if you don't know Lord of the Rings, tough, I'm going to give you the spoiler, okay? Like, if Gollum takes Frodo to the place he doesn't want to go to because that's his destiny to do the thing he needs to do. But Sam, who's his mate from the Shire, from the home, would never take Frodo there because he'd be like, no, Mr. Frodo, don't go there. It's dangerous. Don't go there. That kind of thing. And so almost the enemy is the one that takes Frodo to the places. And here you've got the misty marshes and it's foggy and it's murky and they don't know where they're going. And I had this image when I was sitting on my sofa in November 2023. And what I decided to do was to map out internally that map, and it included the misty marshes and the caves and the trees and the dark places. And I started to kind of wander around my own inner psyche on my sofa by looking at some of those things, and they were much more internal than external. It was things like self-doubt and self-criticism and negativity, and not, I wouldn't say perfectionism, but stuff on self-loathing. There was stuff there about feeling failure and various things that were the internal voices. And so I went around this internal journey on my sofa with a pen, and I wrote it all down and I looked at all of these things, and then I was taken there by sort of the enemy or whatever, the darkness. But actually, when I got to those places, I realized I can be a friend to those things, and I could care for them and love them and tell them that actually they weren't needed anymore because they were just protecting me from things that I didn't need to be protected from. And so metaphorically, I let these things go. And I sat there on the sofa, November 23, and just felt, from being feeling still quite heavy, I felt light and shining, and as if everything kind of opened up and as if everything was open and clear, and I just cried. And it was just this lightness that felt, almost feeling alive. And it was almost like there was that inner power or that inner strength I could have because myself had grown, and I could look in on myself and love the things that were causing harm, and these voices, these thoughts, these default mechanisms. And so on the Tuesday, I spoke to my therapist and I said, this is what happened over the weekend. And I don't know whether anyone's ever had the experience of their therapist crying at them, but that's what my therapist did. And he said, James, you've just saved yourself about 6 years funding of therapy in a weekend. And I said, okay. He said, how does it feel? I said, it feels amazing. And he said, James, you're incredible. And I was like, I think I believe you. And every day since then, I've kind of almost, well, I haven't almost, it has been every day since then. I've then, I got a journal at the beginning of the year last year, and I write down every day, not just positive self-affirmations in a positive psychology kind of way, but hearing that inner voice or hearing God or hearing the universe tell me who I truly am, which isn't the negative voices. It's the ones about being love and being light and being powerful. And that's been my inner journey, my inner pilgrimage. And so my second kind of book was this Anam Cara book. And so I could say my inner pilgrimage is framed by books. Well, it was always going to be, because I've read books since reading Matilda when I was age 9. And so it was almost going to be, but hey, sometimes the right books happen at the right time, and sometimes the right books happen and we don't do anything about them. And I think it was just a case of one of them I didn't have a choice, and the other was I was ready to face things and to respond to things. So it was about, and just to summarize, it was about, I didn't leave the sofa to do an inner pilgrimage. I just found these things and they found me. Maybe it was a book, a kind of a pilgrimage from the sofa to my soul, from books to belonging, from running to facing, one small step at a time. To kind of almost do a pilgrimage of the self, or a pilgrimage to discover who I really am. And yes, it did involve walking, and some of that was walking to process what I was doing on my sofa. But yes, that's a little story of my inner pilgrimage. Thank you. Oh, and I put a couple of notes in the chat of where you can find some of the books and my story that I've written out as well. Thank you.
James, thank you so much. That was an incredible personal story to share, and we thank you for doing that and for raising the fact that we can find ways of taking pilgrimages that really help our soul by sitting on the sofa and reading a book. So just to show that there's so many different ways of taking pilgrimage. Thank you. Carla, sorry, over to you, Carla.
Been a wonderful journey through different stories and resources today. If you found it a helpful webinar and you want to join in future Positively Rural webinars, our next will be in July. The information will come out as with the material, so you don't need to remember the dates necessarily. We'll be focusing on the challenges and opportunities of coastal and rural communities. So if that takes your fancy, please do join us, and the information will be circulated with the booking details within the follow-up email after this webinar. As we near the end of our time together, a reminder that the chaplains are still available if anything has going for you today. We're going to close in prayer, and Lorraine's going to do that for us.
Let's join together in prayer. King of Heaven, would you walk with us and talk with us as we seek to follow in the footsteps of those who have walked before us? Our hearts are set on pilgrimage today, so challenge us, cleanse us, change us, and rearrange us until the fire that burned in the hearts of worldwide pilgrims before us will burn brightly in ours throughout this day, on each day of our journey. Amen. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And it's been delightful to see you and to have yet another Positively Rural with you all. Thank you.